Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this is going to be the second card in my coffee card series, but not a coffee card. It is going to be tea themed. So I'm starting off with my Misty, and I am basically experimenting, and you guys are getting a front row seat to said experiment. I don't really get time to experiment much and play with paper crafting, so when I do get a chance to do anything, I film it and share it. So I had some ideas roughly with what I was going to do, but no idea if it was going to work. So I used my Misty to stamp the cup and this large, swirly, warm stamp. They're both from the Mama Elephant Cup of Wishes set, which I just showed. I just got this like a couple weeks ago. And I stamped it onto some Tim Holtz Distress watercolor paper with some My Favorite Things hybrid natural ink was the color I chose. I wanted a light color, but dark enough that you could see it on camera, and just plus so you could see it at all. If you wanted to go with something lighter, you could do like the Grout Gray is really, really pale. Snow Cone is really, really pale. But I thought I would experiment and do something a little bit darker. So I'd stamped it with that, and then set it. I didn't peel the stamps off, left them on my Misty, and set them aside. And then the colors I'm using, this is for this week's color throwdown challenge, which will be on my blog. I will have a link to it and it'll show the actual colors. And I went through my watercolors and I didn't really have anything that would work without having to mix. So I went with some MFT dye inks, and I am using the Cotton Candy, Safety Orange, Spearmint, Limeade, and then a little bit of Grout Gray dye inks. And just picking up, I just smushed them onto an acetate sheet over some white cardstock so I could see the colors, and then just painted them onto the image. I am planning on heat embossing these images after I'm done watercoloring, and the reason why I was kind of experimenting and stamped the images with a hybrid ink first was I wanted to kind of paint the color outside the lines and do a little messy and experiment. And if I'd heat embossed all these first, obviously the raised embossing would have contained all that color. So, like I said, this was literally just an experiment. So I'd left the stamps in the Misty, and and I had chosen hybrid ink to stamp the image because hybrid ink is not water soluble, so it wouldn't smear everywhere and like spread around, because I didn't want that. I didn't want like a big mess. And once I was in watercoloring and everything was dry, I put it right back in my Misty and then inked up just the cup with my Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink, so that it could stamp right on top of the original cup I had stamped. So stamped that with the Versamark ink, and then I heat embossed it with Simon Says Stamp Detail Gold embossing powder. And then while I was doing that, I was thinking, I was like, ooh, I really liked this little, it's like a lotus flower, just flower image in the set. So I inked that up as well with the Versamark ink and stamped that and heat embossed it with the same embossing powder. Then I put it back in my Misty again. This time remove the cup, and then place this back in here. And one thing I did notice is even though I had taped down this watercolor paper originally, it still warped quite a bit with the watercoloring I was doing. So it wasn't perfectly flat. So even with the Misty, the warm and the cup didn't stamp perfectly over top of the original stamp. Like there's a little bit of a shadow from the hybrid ink, if that makes sense. You can kind of see it in the pictures at the end. But I actually liked that, especially over the warm, like how it's supposed to be, steam and everything. The shadowing from the original stamping of the hybrid ink just worked. So with that one, I heat embossed it with a detail white embossing powder. And I used separate coffee filters to keep the embossing powders separate, so I could funnel them back in the container, not contaminate them. And then I just grabbed the acetate sheet again. I hadn't cleaned it off yet, and picked up those same colors with my watercolor brush and just painted the flower here. And this time I didn't care if the colors were contained by the embossing, since it was kind of the detail on the cup. But you can see where, like around the edges of the cup, where I had the color kind of seep out, just for something different. So yeah, something fun anyway. And then I die cut this with one of the inside and out stitched rectangle stacks dynamics from My Favorite Things. And then I grabbed a piece of cotton candy cardstock from MFT, and I'm using the Swiss Dots background stamp, and I inked it up with Hero Arts Unicorn White pigment ink. and stamp that onto the cotton candy cardstock. And this, when you see the inspiration picture on my blog for this color challenge, they have these like cookies on it that are polka dot, and that's kind of what inspired me for the background of that card. And then there's all these little companion stamps in this Cup of Wishes set, and they're tiny little stamps. And I grabbed a piece of spearmint cardstock and coated it with my anti-static powder tool. And then I stamped the thanks sentiment onto it with the same Versamark ink. And then I used the detail gold embossing powder again. And I gotta say, I'm really loving the Simon Says Stamp detail powders. They are just so nice and they emboss so well. And like a tiny, tiny little sentiment like this embossed perfectly with it. So once that was embossed, I used my paper trimmer to trim that down, and then I trimmed each end with my scissors, and then just notched each end in the center with my scissors, and then you cut from each end to the center of that little notch, and it creates perfect little flag ends on this tiny little piece of cardstock. So once I've got that, I'm going to add a tiny little strip of foam tape to the back of this sentiment. So I just trimmed that down with scissors and then used my grid paper to kind of line up that little sentiment, so I made sure it wasn't all wonky. And then I added some more foam tape to the back of this watercolor piece, and I was generous with the foam tape because, like I had said, even after running it through my die cut machine, it was still a little bit warped. So it adhered that really well to the polka dot piece. And then for my card base itself, it is heavyweight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I scored it at 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. And I've got it opened up to the inside of the card. And to finish off the inside of the card, I just inked up the cup again, this time with the cotton candy dye ink that I used for the watercoloring. And then there's all these little T-tag stamps in the set as well. So I inked up the one with the little heart with the spearmint ink. And I didn't have any sentiments in the set that I wanted to use like to kind of finish it off. So I grabbed the Simon Says Stamp Friendship Messages stamp set and just grabbed the thank you stamp and inked it up with the safety orange ink and stamped that. And then to adhere the card front, I'm just using my Tombow Mono Multi, which I love. Really do love this adhesive. It gives you a few seconds wiggle room so you can make sure you've got things lined up straight before the adhesive sets, and then it's permanent. And then I dug through my stash and found some enamel dots that are almost the exact match to the spearmint colored cardstock. So I added a few of those, and that's all there was to it. So if you're interested in any supplies used, the color challenge, my blog post, anything like that, check out the links directly below the video in the description box. I'll have it all there for you along with links to the supplies used. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping my videos, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.